At 10 o'clock, the BBC News now on BBC One with Jane Hill.
Police have searched the home of Sir Cliff Richard following an allegation of a sexual assault dating back to the 1980s. The singer, who's abroad, says the accusation is completely false. Officers from 2 police forces spent much of the day at Sir Cliff's penthouse flat in Berkshire.
A search warrant has been granted after the police have received an allegation relating to a sexual nature. The allegation relates to a young boy under the age of 16 years.
Also on tonight's programme, a special report from Mount Sinjar. Plans for a rescue mission have been abandoned, yet the threat from militants hasn't gone away.
The question remains, how are these people and a million other displaced Iraqis going to get home when the Islamic State controls so much of the country?
A convoy of lorries travelling from Russia to Ukraine creates further tension between the countries.
Mum, I got 3 C's.
I got BCC.
What? Are you serious?
And it's results day for A-level students. There are more A stars and more places at university.
Tonight on BBC London, the housing boom shows signs of cooling as the number looking for new homes drops sharply. And the picture reportedly showing an extremist from West London holding a severed head in Syria.
Hello, good evening. Police investigating an allegation of sexual assault have spent much of the day searching a property in Berkshire owned by Sir Cliff Richard. The alleged offence dates to the mid-1980s and is said to relate to a boy who was under 16 at the time. Sir Cliff, who is abroad, hasn't been arrested. He gave a statement in which he said the accusation was completely false. From Sunningdale in Berkshire, David Sillito reports.
A small convoy of unmarked police cars arrived quietly this morning at this gated complex of apartments near Sunningdale. From the air, you could see 8 officers head towards Cliff Richard's empty penthouse flat. Inside, a glimpse of the search.
Today I can confirm that South Yorkshire Police have gained entry into a property in the Sunningdale area of Berkshire. Officers are currently searching the property. A search warrant has been granted after the police have received an allegation relating to a sexual nature. The allegation relates to a young boy under the age of 16 years.
Let's welcome tonight Cliff Richard. We're delighted to have you here.
In the 1980s, the evangelist Billy Graham attracted huge crowds at his rallies. Cliff Richard was, over the years, a regular on his stage.
For me, being a Christian has become the most important part of my life.
It wasn't this event, but a rally in Sheffield in 1985, in which it's alleged Cliff Richard assaulted a boy under the age of 16. In a statement he said, "Today, for many months I've been aware of allegations against me of historic impropriety which have been circulating online. The allegations," he says, "are completely false. I will cooperate fully should the police wish to speak to me." Cliff Richard. There may have been perhaps a hint of rock and roll rebellion when he started out, but since then he's been a byword for clean-cut, wholesome, family-friendly pop music. The rock and roll star who gave us the Wimbledon sing-along. His passionate fans have made him one of our most successful performers. His lifestyle, homes in London and Barbados, and summers at this vineyard in Portugal. Although no sign of him here today. Meanwhile, back at his Berkshire home, we watched as the police began to leave the apartment.
This venture is a joint operation between South Yorkshire Police and Thames Valley Police. And as you can see, the first of the vehicles are now leaving. They've been in there for more than 5 hours, and we've already seen a number of items taken from that penthouse flat, packed up in metal boxes, and now taken away for examination.
It is, though, just a search. No arrest, no charge, one allegation that he has strenuously denied. David Siletto, BBC News, Sunningdale.
Well, our correspondent Tom Burridge is on the Algarve tonight, where it's understood Cliff Richard is on holiday. Tom.
That's right, Jane. So we understand Sir Cliff Richard was here at his villa in the Algarve this morning. I'm told by someone who knows Sir Cliff Richard well that he had already left this part of Portugal when the story broke around lunchtime. I'm told that he had already gone away on a pre-planned visit to another part of Portugal, the Alentejo region, which is a popular wine-growing region, with his sister. Now, wine and wine-growing is one of Sir Cliff Richard's passions. He has a small vineyard adjacent to this villa and a much larger vineyard just around the corner from here. And in fact, several days ago, Sir Cliff Richard sang at a fundraising charity event, raising money for a charity which helps abandoned and neglected children, raising a considerable amount of money, I'm told. Sir Cliff Richard is known very well amongst the expat community here and the Portuguese community here. He's been coming to this part of Portugal for around 40 years. And one final thing, we understand that as things stand, the Portuguese police are in no way involved in the investigation, which is now ongoing back in Britain.
All right, thanks very much. Tom Burridge there in the Algarve. President Obama has said that American airstrikes have broken the siege of a mountain in northern Iraq. The US military says a mission to rescue civilians stranded in mountains above the town of Sinjar is now unlikely to happen, saying conditions there aren't as serious as previously thought. Thousands of Yazidis have fled to the relative safety of Dohuk in Iraqi Kurdistan, having made the long journey from Mount Sinjar. Our correspondent Paul Wood and cameraman Jimmy Michael travelled by road to the mountain and spoke to the people still trying to reach safety. He sent us this special report.
This is the one road from Mount Sinjar not controlled by the Islamic State. This harsh and barren terrain, the only way of escape for tens of thousands of Yazidis. A few are still making their way out on foot. This family collapsed, exhausted, after getting here this morning. Another family told me they'd hidden for days, silent and terrified, before sneaking away, past bodies in the streets. A few people remain scattered across the mountain. They've cobbled together a camp with supplies dropped by the RAF. It is brutally hot. They have next to nothing, but they say they have no choice but to flee. One man tells me the jihadis put a gun to his head and told him, "Convert or die." Like everyone here, he says he will never abandon his faith. Sheltered courtesy of the British taxpayer, they are profoundly grateful for the aid they've received, but they're also desperate for more military help. They face genocide, they say. First they came for the Christians, then us, the Yazidis, he says. They're striking all of the minorities. If the international community will not step in, all of us will be destroyed. The only soldiers confronting the Islamic State in this part of Iraq are the Kurds. The US and Britain are determined not to send troops. But even with US air support, there's not much these lightly armed Kurds can do. They're stuck here, along with those who fled. By one count, more than 100,000 terrified Yazidis fled over this mountain, many of them at risk of dying from the heat or from thirst. A humanitarian catastrophe has been averted. Most people have moved on. There are just a few stragglers left behind. But the question remains, how are these people and a million other displaced Iraqis going to get home when the Islamic State controls so much of the country? The refugee camps overstretched. They squat by the side of the road in despair. The Yazidis don't hold out much hope either of a foreign intervention to defeat the jihadis. After thousands of years in this part of Iraq, these people are afraid they no longer have a place here. Paul Wood, BBC News, Mount Sinjar.
Well, the United Nations has declared its highest level of emergency in Iraq because of the humanitarian crisis triggered by the advance of Islamic State in the north. Kurdish officials say the situation in the province of Dohuk is now critical after hundreds of thousands of displaced people arrived there. Our correspondent Caroline Wyatt reports from the city.
Volunteer Kurdish medical teams have been risking their lives to reach Mount Sinjar to treat the injured and the sick. These are the images they brought back. But over the past few days, the numbers still stranded there have diminished. But many of the most vulnerable survivors are still arriving in Iraqi Kurdistan in urgent need of treatment. In one day alone, hospitals in Dohuk treated up to 800 casualties. Niaf Khalif Hassi is 80. In the exodus, even the old had to walk to survive. He told me he had to go on foot down the mountain for over 50 kilometres. His journey took days. In Dohuk now, the real focus is on how to look after the survivors, how to treat the sick and the injured who've come down from the mountains, and how to prevent any outbreak of disease, thanks to the conditions that many refugees are now living in. The Yazidi families who made it to safety remain in these abandoned buildings or in schools in their tens of thousands.
Maybe in the few days we may face some endemic diseases. We don't know. We may have an epidemic of cholera, of polio, of measles, because the places where they live now, they are just public buildings in public parks.
Existing refugee camps are already full. Dohuk province is now home to 400,000 people fleeing Islamic State fighters, doubling the population here. Support from outside is what they need here, and some of that was visible last night in the form of another RAF airdrop of aid to Mount Sinjar. Although it seems there will be no US rescue after American special forces landed on the mountain to assess what needed to be done.
The bottom line is that the situation on the mountain has greatly improved, and Americans should be very proud of our efforts. Because of the skill and professionalism of our military and the generosity of our people, we broke the ISIL siege of Mount Sinjar, we helped vulnerable people reach safety, and we helped save many innocent lives.
Last night, these Chinooks arrived at RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus after flying in from the UK, ready and waiting to play their part, whatever it may be, in bringing help to Iraq. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Dohuk.
In the last hour, the Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki has announced he's standing down. The United States had blamed Nouri al-Maliki for the political deadlock in the country and the failure to tackle Islamic State. We can get more from Jim Muir, who is in Erbil. So what does all this mean, Jim?
Well, it's extremely significant because just a few days ago, Mr. Maliki was denouncing the nomination of his successor as a constitutional breach and said that he would resist it to the end and defeat it. So now, just a few days later, here we have him turning around. And really, the writing was on the wall for him because everybody is against him. Iran, the main sponsor, as it were, or patron of the Shia groups to which he belongs, the Shia clerical establishment here, his own Dawa party, the coalition of which it is part, not to mention the Sunnis and the Kurds who've been really disaffected. And that, I think, was the main American concern, that the Sunnis have been alienated. That created the space for the Islamic radicals to move in. And it was absolutely clear to the Americans, at least, and to the Iranians and to everybody, including the UN, that Mr. Maliki was not the man, despite his claims, to pull the country back together again so that a firm base in Baghdad, a political base, could be used as a springboard for a serious move against the Islamic State, which everybody sees as a deadly menace to this country.
Jim, thank you. Jim Muir. The wife of Robin Williams, who took his own life on Monday, has revealed that he was in the early stages of Parkinson's disease. In a statement, Susan Schneider said the actor, who had struggled with alcohol and drug addiction, had been sober at the time of his death, but was suffering from anxiety and depression. The Eurozone's economy ground to a halt in the second quarter of this year, with the latest figures showing no growth overall. Europe's biggest economy, Germany, shrank by 0.2%, while France recorded no overall growth. The figures suggest the Eurozone's recovery from its longest ever recession has stalled. Our Europe editor, Gavin Hewitt, is in Brussels tonight. Gavin, give us a sense of just what's going on here.
Well, Jane, zero growth over the past 3 months is regarded as really disappointing. Take Germany. The German economy fell back, although it remains fundamentally sound. There are signs that it is being affected by a cut to its exports because of sanctions against Russia over Ukraine. And then take France. The French economy is stagnating. The government in Paris today was warning that it was going to have to slash its forecast for growth by a half to 0.5%, and also warning that it would fail to meet the target for cutting the budget deficit. Then take the case of Italy. Italy's back in recession with huge debts. And both of these countries are struggling to implement reforms like making it easier to hire and fire workers and cutting bureaucracy. Why does all this matter? It looks now as if it will be highly unlikely that the Eurozone this year will have growth of above 1%. Secondly, there will be great pressure on the European Central Bank, the ECB, this autumn to provide further monetary stimulus. And then lastly, it matters to the UK because the Eurozone is still the most important market. And any prolonged weakness there could have an impact on the UK economy. Jane.
Yes, Gavin, thank you for now, Gavin Hewitt. So the waiting is over for A-level students across England, Wales and Northern Ireland, with this year's results showing a slight rise in the numbers getting the top A-star grade. The overall pass rate, though, has dropped slightly for the first time in more than 30 years to 98%. That is down just 0.1 percentage point, which is equivalent to 800 pupils. The number of university places available is now estimated to have reached 500,000, partly because an extra 30,000 places have been funded by the government. Our education correspondent Alex Forsyth reports.
A quick rip and results revealed. For some delight, others despair.
Yes, checkmate, we're in.
Christy Nunn's hard work had paid off. Early this morning, he learned online he'd got the university place he wanted.
How are you feeling? It is a bit of a relief. It was fairly stressful waiting and seeing whether they were going to accept it or not, but the offer was decent.
Thank you.
For others, the news wasn't as good as hoped.
I am quite gutted. I didn't get into my first choice, so I might have to see if I can maybe reapply to them through clearing and see if they'll have me.
Whether students have done better or worse than they expected, there's still plenty of choice, because this year there's a record number of university places on offer. It's a buyer's market.
You may begin.
This time, more students sat exams in traditional academic subjects, such as maths and science. And with no limit on the number of places on offer to those with top grades, there's increasing competition to attract students. Queen's University in Belfast is offering free flights home to students from mainland Britain. Others have scholarships with cash awards, sports club memberships, even free laptops.
Universities should be scouring the country like talent scouts, looking for the best young people who can make a big difference to their own prospects, but to the prospects of their university and the country. That's why we've taken away this limit on student numbers, so that there's a place for everyone who's capable of benefiting from higher education.
Empty places, however, cost universities money. They need them filled. Many were on offer through clearing, even some from top institutions. Despite the choice, it was a difficult day for those who narrowly missed out on dream courses. Ruben was just 5 marks short of a place at Manchester.
I'm kind of left a bit stranded now, so I've got to sort it out. But it's just a bit gutting that I was so close, but so far.
But after hours of worry, he convinced his first choice course to let him on, despite not getting the grades.
Thank God I got in.
Oh no, that's great. Further proof that now universities need students as much as pupils need their place. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Bristol.
In America, Missouri State Police are to take charge of security in a suburb that's seen 4 days of violent protests after an unarmed 18-year-old was shot dead by the police. President Obama has appealed for peace and calm in Ferguson, a suburb of St. Louis, where a black teenager, Michael Brown, died on Saturday. The president also said there was never an excuse for violence against the police. In Ukraine, there's been heavy shelling in Donetsk, which is held by pro-Russia rebels. The city has been surrounded for several weeks by Ukrainian forces. The latest violence came as a Russian convoy, said by Moscow to be carrying aid, made its way towards a rebel-held part of the Ukrainian border. Tonight, the lorries have had to park about 20 miles from the border, near the town of Kamensk-Shaktinsky. And from there, our correspondent Steve Rosenberg sent this report.
Those who saw it today could only stop and stare. It's one of the largest humanitarian convoys Russia has ever organised. Nearly 300 lorries, packed, Moscow says, with aid for eastern Ukraine. All day it snaked its way through southern Russia before stopping in a field 20 miles from the border. But Ukraine is reluctant to let the lorries in. It fears it may be a cover for a Russian military operation.
Well, the border with Ukraine is just a short drive away from here. And if Russia decides to take this convoy across that border without the permission of Kiev, then the Ukrainian government will view that as a major provocation.
We wanted to see what was in the lorries. Ukraine suspects there may be fuel and ammunition for pro-Russia separatists across the border. The Russians we met here agreed to open up one of the vehicles. No secret weapon shipments in this one, just sleeping bags. One of the drivers, Dima, told me that Russia was trying to help Ukrainians and that it was the West that was the aggressor. America, he says, wants to grab Ukraine for itself. Today, Ukraine dispatched a rival humanitarian convoy to the east of the country. The message to Russia: we don't need your help. But the Red Cross is warning that the humanitarian situation in eastern Ukraine is critical now. As fighting intensifies, thousands here lack access to water, medicine and power. Today, artillery shells struck Donetsk. In this city, people just can't believe their homes are being reduced to rubble. I don't know what to do, Valentina says. I don't have anywhere else to run to. Ukraine accuses Russia of starting this war and of arming the separatist rebels. That's why when Russia says it wants to help by distributing aid, Kiev is so reluctant to accept it. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, near the Russian-Ukrainian border.
With the referendum on Scottish independence just weeks away, opinion among Scotland's voters remains finely balanced. But what's the view from elsewhere in the Union? In a moment, we'll hear from Wales. But first, though, this report from Northern Ireland and Chris Buckler.
Bagpipes of a home in County Antrim. Ballymoney is a town in the heart of Ulster Scots territory, a place where they celebrate the many links between Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, there are many concerned about the prospect of Scottish independence, people who are keen to defend the Union.
Because they're part of the United Kingdom, and it means my flag would have to change.
And flags really matter to Unionists. They're openly worried about what the referendum in Scotland could mean for the UK as a whole.
But I think if Scotland breaks away, then Wales will say, well, we want to go away, and it'll just all disintegrate.
While Unionists are sounding a warning about what a yes vote could mean for future generations, others see the referendum as a potential opportunity. Irish nationalists believe Scottish independence could aid their campaign for a border poll to decide whether Northern Ireland remains in the UK or joins the Republic.
People in Northern Ireland would start thinking, well, if Scotland is getting a chance at a referendum, then how come we're not getting a chance at a referendum?
Only around a dozen miles separate Scotland from Northern Ireland at their closest point. On a clear day, you can even see land across the sea. The question is, would independence give a new sense of distance between nations?
At this whisky firm in the Brecon Beacons, they keep a close eye on changes in Scotland. Independence could have an impact on their industry. But when it comes to Wales's place in the UK, the appetite for change here is more about maturing the current system.
Wales sometimes suffers from being seen as Scotland's smaller Celtic cousin. It's assumed the political debate here is just a watered-down version of what happens there. But in fact, there's very little talk of independence for Wales. The real debate here is on the future of devolved power, how it should be shared with Westminster.
It passed many people by, but Wales had its own referendum 3 years ago. 2/3 of voters said they wanted direct lawmaking powers. The leaders of the Yes campaign now want to go further, getting the same powers Scotland already has.
Unless the politicians behind us are going to spend the next 15 years arguing about constitutions rather than about bread and butter issues, we need to sort this out.
Polls suggest most people here favour moving forward to more powers, but some, like those who voted no in 2011, fear Wales is drifting in the wrong direction.
What we really need is for consolidation, for work to be done on improving prosperity in Wales.
Any thirst for independence in Wales is limited, but Scotland's vote next month could yet help decide what power flows here in the future. Hywel Griffith, BBC News.
And that is all from us now on BBC One. It's time for the news wherever you are tonight. Bye-bye. Good night.